UCF is running it back with Scott Frost. But is this a good hire or is this a bad case of frostbite?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For the first word from the last word on sports is Andrew Gluchov from the last word on sports. Andrew, UCF did it in the middle of conference championship week. We're going to ask this question years from now. Where were you when Scott Frost got hired again? Scott Frost is the guy. UCF has decided to have somewhat of a retread hire. The floor is yours, my friend. Opening thoughts on this. I know you just got finished writing an extensive article on this subject. What do you think about this decision to rehire Scott Frost?
Well, there's two stories going on at the same time. One is the hire itself, which is actually been a very polarizing hire. If you look online with, on various UCF fan Facebook groups or in Twitter, this is actually a very polarizing hire. You have a lot of people are looking back on it very fondly at the run, the 2-year run that Scott Frost had. 6-7 the first year, 13-0 the second year, the 2017 season, very well documented. And then on the other side, there are people thinking this guy failed spectacularly at Nebraska. He's been out of college football since being fired 3 games into 2022, has not been involved at all in college sports as we're navigating arguably the most complicated shift in college athletics. Hasn't been involved. So you have two camps coming this. The truth is this is a hire that was not in the plans. This was the fallback to the fallback. UCF kicked the tires and actually sent out offers to multiple coaches. They all said no for one reason or another. I think most of it's financial. UCF doesn't have a lot of cash on hand. They're a bit strapped. They're still kind of paying like a high-end G5 more than a Power 4 conference team. The facilities are still lagging behind their peers. Now they're going to be catching up, but they're still behind. So you've got two camps as far as this. Now, the bigger story that no one's talking about is why so many candidates said no thank you. But at the end of the day, Scott Frost is the man. What's old is new again. Bell bottoms are back, and it's who knows if this is going to work out. You know what? Maybe in his quest to fill in his coaching staff, you may see a familiar face or two. I think from a fan base standpoint, this is a shot in the arm. This will reinvigorate a lot of fans who are starting to show apathy. And I think this will be good at bringing in donations, help build up that NIL, treasure chest to bring in more players. So I think there was some financial drive in this, but at the end of the day, Scott Frost is the man. So, support him.
We asked earlier in the week, it seemed like Jamie Chadwell was the name that was hot at the top of the list, and that the guy that they wanted maybe. Now, I've covered many coaching searches, and I can tell you after a guy gets hired, the AD comes out and says, "This is the guy we wanted the whole time," and we all know that that's malarkey. Like, there's no way that Scott Frost was at the top of their list here if they felt like there was a better option, but. Is this a result of the situation that UCF has put itself in? They made the decision to bring Gus Malzahn in. It didn't work. And then with how they handled the end of Gus's tenure, I ask you this both publicly and privately, like, hey, if he was going to resign, maybe before the last game to give UCF more time. We see this happen all the time. Hey, I'm stepping down at the end of the season, but I'm going to coach. I'm going to finish out my commitment this year, and I'm going to allow UCF to at least put feelers out there to potential coaching candidates. Did the timeline contribute to how they ended up with Scott Frost?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure when Gus let Terry Mohajir know that he was going to leave. I know the idea of firing Malzahn was talked about, but the truth was UCF didn't have the money, and that's why they came to this agreement. He was able to resign. He saved face there, and they allowed him to do it without any cash changing hands. It was an amicable solution that allowed both to move on. Because I mean, Gus is a class act. I mean, he handled. He was straight up. There wasn't like this shadow games going on, and he wanted to get out as quickly as possible so that UCF can do a search. I mean, he could have dragged it on, but he didn't. He left first opportunity he had, which was Saturday. The end of the regular season, UCF season had ended 2 days prior on third. And so there was, sorry, the day prior on Black Friday, and so there was an opportunity for him to say, okay, well, it's the next day I'm leaving, and here's here's what I want to do. And UCF worked with him. Terry Mohajir worked with him. They found a solution that worked for both, and everyone was better for it. So I think it was the best opportunity for UCF to be able to try to put feelers out, and they did. And the truth was, they went after Chadwell hard, and they were negotiating in good faith. And it just came down to the fact of, like, I don't think you can afford me. And the truth was, they couldn't. Turned down over $6 million a year from Mississippi State last year. Liberty's paying him $4 million a year, which is astronomically high for a group of five. I mean, that's low end power four right there. But I mean, this is Liberty University. They have more cash in their coffers than most universities do. It doesn't matter if you're power conference or not. Liberty is absolutely flush with money. That money is no object. So, there could have been some back end stuff with Liberty saying, "Hey, we'll sweeten the pot a little bit," but it was really difficult for UCF to put together a package that could work and get Chadwell to move over, because he's in a very safe situation because he has so much money at his disposal with Liberty. They're going to be top end, like the top echelon of the group, the group of 5 or 6, whatever we want to call the Pac-12 next year. Going to be in the top echelon this year. Obviously they didn't go undefeated. They didn't, win, end up in the Conference USA championship game, but they're still going to a bowl game, and they still, have a pretty good record. So, I mean, Chadwell can basically name his price there. So, I mean, they looked elsewhere. Obviously John Summerall, he's got eyes elsewhere, and UCF wasn't going to win a bidding war with a West Virginia or a North Carolina or even a Purdue. Purdue may be a basketball school, but Purdue's got way more money available than UCF does. UCF has strapped. They don't make their first full year media share as part of the Big 12 until next year. At the end of the 25-26 season, academic year, that's when that money will start to really flow. They are only getting $19 million this year, which is a partial share. It's a structured, thing that the other newbies that joined in 2023 got. The schools that joined from the Pac-12 in 2024 not affected by this because of the pro rata clause that ESPN had. They're getting full shares right out the door. So UCF's behind their peers in the finances, and that doesn't even count the fact that they were behind walking into the door. So as a result of all of that, they were very limited. And so Scott Frost is likely, we haven't gotten the details of the contract yet. I'm sure it'll come out, but I'm pretty sure it's also going to be a very school-friendly deal. People were not knocking down Frost's door to get him to,
Yeah, for sure.
He was an analyst for the LA Rams. He wasn't even he was an analyst.
I think Andrew, so when I see these kind of retread hires, one of the things that I think is, okay, you've left yourself in a position where maybe this is the best you could do right now, but there's a bet that's being made on whether Frost's acumen from 2017, when he led UCF to an undefeated season. They absolutely mauled Auburn in a bowl game that year. I think it was the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Is that can that translate to today's college football? We've seen coaches retire because the game has changed so much just over the last 3 or 4 years with NIL and the way that those messages are being delivered. After Frost was let go from Nebraska, we maybe heard some unsavory things come out about his tenure there as well too. Look, it seems to me that UCF is betting that Frost is looking to take advantage of a second chance, like a second or third life here in college coaching that most coaches never get.
Yeah, historically retreads, rehires don't end up the best. I mean, Bill Snyder may be the biggest exception, and he had an 11-win season, a 10-win season between 2009 and 2018. But I mean, you saw a drop off compared to the end of his first run, where they're top 10 ranked. They're knocking on the door to the BCS championship, with what was it, Michael Bishop back in the day. Mac Brown was another one that comes to mind. His second, stint at North Carolina did not go very well. So there's definitely a risk here. And, UCF may be looking at this. Look, we're behind financially. We're behind facility wise. We're behind in none of these areas. But this is, I think, there's a fan service hire more than anything else, because people are going to donate. They're going to be able to build some funds there. So even if he falls flat on his face, I think UCF ultimately benefits from this hire. It's less a football hire than more of a friend building hire, because the donors are going to appreciate the fact that they took the chance and brought him back. Even if he fails, UCF looks better for it in the eyes of those donors that are going to pony up, because they made this move to try to bring back the glory years. I hope he does well. I want him to do well, because if he does well, UCF does well. That's what we're about. But is he going to do well? I don't know. I don't expect a 13-0 season at all. But I'm hoping, considering in his entire career as a head coach, that's his only winning season. I'm hoping that they make a bowl game at least every year. I don't want to see Nebraska Part 2 come around where you never finish better than 5-7 and fifth in a division. Granted, divisions are gone, but you get my point.
Yeah. Well, was Scott Frost the hot girl, or was he the backup prom date? You kind of touched on this. We're going to deal with that in our second segment right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Andrew, as we speak, conference championship week is going. And if you placed a bet, I hope you did it with our friends at FanDuel. You're guaranteed $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Was Scott Frost the first choice? But it's so many. Again, I've covered so many of these coaching searches, and I'll say it again. So many times the athletic director comes out after and says, this is the guy we were targeting the whole time. We never confirmed publicly that we were going after Jamie Chadwell or John Summerall or any of the other names on the list. This was the guy, and here's why we thought he was the guy. I think we can all agree, if we hear that, that's crap. But, look, I think that this can work. I think this hire can work. If he treats this like it is his last chance at coaching college football, and he approaches it with the enthusiasm, with the vigor that he's going to need to be able to propel this program back to a place that we've already seen it. So it's not like he's trying to resurrect it from the ashes of something that we've never seen in Orlando before. They've done it. They've had success, and he was part of it. Can he recreate that magic? I think that he has a chance to do that, especially in the NIL era with the right counsel. But Andrew, again, I want you to pub your article here a little bit. You had some feelings about this hire, and I want you to share that with us.
Well, I quoted Thomas Wolfe and "You Can't Go Home Again." Make your mistakes, take your chances, look silly, but keep on going. Don't freeze up. And I broke that down into how that entire line applies to what happened. Make your mistakes. UCF was in a very different place when Scott Frost was first hired. 2015, George O'Leary was on fumes. He ran out of gas. He wanted to retire 2 years earlier, and he was convinced to stay. So you have this very talented but directionless group of players. They're the most talented winless team you will ever see. It is the 2015 UCF squad. And it shows that you can have all the talent in the world, but if you have nothing coaching them, it's not going to matter. And that's what happened. So Danny White comes in as the new athletic director. He wants to make a splash and get an up-and-comer that can move the needle. And he brings in Scott Frost. Well, you have this very talented group already there. You put in a few key, players on your own, make a few changes, you get a 6 and 7 team. So, I mean, that is a very material improvement. Bowl game should always be the goal, the baseline goal of a season. If you're a self-respecting program, your goal should always be at least get a bowl game. But I mean, the real goal is a conference championship. Control what you can control. Any school can go win a conference championship. It's in their power to do so. So, there's your ceiling, there's your floor. And then the off-season development of quarterback Mackenzie Milton with Mario Verduzco, he blossomed. As a freshman, he struggled. He had a lot of mechanical issues. He was booed off the field during the 2016 Cure Bowl, nearly quit UCF over it, decided to stick it out, and magic started happening. And even Mother Nature tried to foil UCF with Hurricane Irma and failed. UCF had to take a 3-week break between their first game and their second game, and then played 11 straight games after that. So, I mean, that's brutal. And you saw the scores getting a little bit closer and closer as the season went on. They were getting tired. They're getting beat up. They didn't have a bye week to rest. It was just one game after another, after another, and after another. But they always found ways to win. And that was something that Gus Malzahn could not get done, is he could not find ways to win those close 50-50 games. So then you finish the story. You win the conference championship game. You get the win against Auburn at the Peach Bowl. And the stories, finish the story. Then during the conference championship game, word comes out in the middle of the game that Scott Frost is going to accept the Nebraska job, and he does. And that was actually put in place a while prior when he was traveling with the team to Philadelphia to play the Temple Owls. There were some backdoor meetings going on, and so he leaves, and there was questions whether he was ready. Only 2 years as a head coach, and now you're going to try to be the next great thing. You're the golden child of Nebraska. You're coming back home. You're from Lincoln. Your dad was was a coach in the area. So this is the dream fulfilled, and it turned into a nightmare. Nebraska never finished better than 5-7. He finished with a 16 and I think it was a 16-31 record at Nebraska. Got fired, and then these things start coming out as far as the question his work ethic and some of his off-field choices and things that are coming out. UCF fans, they're all like, what is this? Like, we don't remember seeing this Scott Frost at UCF. And whether all this was fact or fiction, that's up for debate. Could this been the jilted lover of Nebraska football taking their vengeance on Scott Frost for failing them? Because he failed them. That 16-31 record, that's the worst coaching record that they've had in over 50 years. So, I mean, he's had the worst run in half a century, and he unfortunately has to own that, and he's going to own that. Meanwhile, UCF's next season, 2018, proved maybe it's not the coach, because Josh Heupel, comes in, runs a slightly different, instead of more of a spread, he runs an air raid. They go undefeated in the regular season. And if they lose Mackenzie Milton in the penultimate, game of the regular season, maybe they won. They would win the Fiesta Bowl to end the season, but they lost. So the 25-game win streak was snapped, but it took 4 more games in 2019 with a freshman quarterback in Dylan Gabriel to finally snap their regular season losing streak. So continuing on, now we've moved forward a few years. Gus Malzahn gets hired at UCF going into the 2021 season. This is after both, Josh Heupel and Danny White left for Tennessee after the 2020 season. Heupel's productivity decreased each of the 3 seasons that he coached at UCF, and fans were getting a little upset over that, maybe prematurely. So Terry Mohajir comes in, he hires Gus Malzahn. They have a prior relationship from the time they worked together at Arkansas State, almost a decade earlier. And 21 starts off well. They deal with some hiccups. They have to play a freshman quarterback in Mikey Keene after Dylan Gabriel gets knocked out at the end of the 3rd game. But they finished the season with a Gasparilla win over the Florida Gators, which was a big deal if you're in the state of Florida. 2022, the last season that they were members of the American, they get to the conference championship game. They fall a little bit short. Quarterback John Rice Plumlee was just beat up, and they didn't have anyone really to spell him at that point. They lose the bowl game. 23 comes around, first year in the Big 12, and they're the only ones of the freshman 4 to make a bowl game. The others all had losing records. So, when you think about it, that was a successful season. It was 2024 where the wheels fell off. I mean, and we've talked about this, kind of lost control of the locker room. He couldn't really juggle the responsibilities of a head coach in the NIL era and do what he wants to do, which is call plays. Hence his exit to Florida State, so he can do just that. Run his offense the way, and it's, do what you love. And that's what he loves doing. Okay. I can respect that. But during this time, Frost is completely outside of college football. He was hired in 2024 to be an analyst for the Los Angeles Rams, focusing mostly on special teams, but doing a little bit in offense, working at the offense and defense. But he was an analyst. He wasn't a coach. So then we get to the end of it. Most coaches work their way back through the system. Maybe they start off as an analyst, become an assistant coach. You go from the assistant coach to a head coach. Maybe at a G4, G5 group of a lower level FBS job, and then grow to a power conference job. Well, Scott Frost is skipping us a bunch of steps here because he's taking advantage of the situation. UCF was not able to hit on any of the guys they went after. And they talked to a lot of people. It's not just, Jamie Chadwell. They talked to John Sarmal. I mean, we saw the report on Lincoln Riley. They talked to Lincoln Riley and his people. Nothing worked. So here we are. You have Scott Frost, who wants to be head coach again, and no one else is talking to him. So UCF had this fallback to the fallback plan. And that's what Frost ended up being. And you're right. If Terry comes out and says, "Oh, he was our guy," I don't think he's going to, because everyone's going to call him on that, because it's complete bull. We all know Scott Frost was not the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 choice, but he's the guy. And so while we have to ask the question of why didn't others want to come coach at UCF, and I think a lot of it has to do with the tough finances they're currently in, and the fact that they're in a power conference and they're at the bottom. It's not like, back when they were in the American, where they're near the top of the group of 5. They're near the bottom in facilities, their stadium size, the cash they have to work with. And you know what? That's not UCF's fault. That's part of this, growing pains of going from, being at the kids' table to the adult table. So to wrap it up, what needs to be done? Can this era work? Maybe. But he's going to have to quickly assemble a staff, and UCF needs to learn from what just happened. It can't just all be on Frost. UCF has to realize they have some mistakes they have to fix. And one of them, and you've seen some schools start to do this, is they got to hire a general manager. Hire a guy, handle the NIL portion, allow the coaching staff to coach, which is what they didn't have before. And if they can do that, I think they can offset some of the lack of resources they have, using Frost to help build up the coffers a little bit. But I think if you allow this staff to coach, and Frost, not really being inside the NIL machine in the last couple years, take the pressure off him, let him focus on the football, and let business people take care of the NIL. I think that'll help make this have more of a chance of success.
Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be interesting to watch and see how this unfolds here. But look, for right now, Scott Frost is the guy, and hopefully he can recreate some of that 2017 magic. We're going to give our final thoughts on this right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Please go visit Omaha Steaks. They're great sponsors of Locked On UCF. Andrew, this is it. This is this is the hire that they made, and I'll tell you, I understand being in a position where you gotta hire a guy, and maybe your choices are not the best because of the position that you find yourself in. But certainly, I think that despite maybe some of the perceived negatives, this can work. We've seen it happen across college football. We've seen it happen in college basketball as well too, where coaches with failures on their resume or checkered past come back to have successful second goes at schools that they previously visited, or even at new schools because their athletic director chose to give them a chance. We're going to get out of here, but I know you're going to have lots to say on this in the future. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can read all the great articles you're going to write on this in the future.
Well, you can catch me on social media at Statboy Drew. That's Twitter. That's Blue Sky. You can catch my work on The Last Word on College Football, part of The Last Word on Sports Family. And yes, as you mentioned, I just put up an article talking about the hire of Scott Frost, what led to it, and where do we go from here.
That's it for another great episode of Locked On UCF. Thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including a UCF. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow with more Locked On UCF.